All right, here we go. Hello, everybody. Um, okay, so here we are, week five of this new fun life thing. Hope you're all doing well enough. I'm going to go over um, the three things for the week. So basically, we're turning our attention to the last essay, which is the essay number three. The final draft of essay number two is due on Wednesday by, and here's something I made, but I don't know what happened to it. So if you have, I was going to use this as a sign-in sheet, and then if you have questions, so here's the idea. I gave people back their like a PDF file. Some people didn't get it because I forgot to press the word submit. So if you're one of those people, you want to let me know. I tried to go through and fix it. Like I attach it, but then I also have to put submit and blah blah blah. So that's what happened. Um, in any event, yeah. So if you have questions, what I wanted people to do is be specific about your questions, right? Like add, quote something like, "Here's this thing I wrote. What do you think about blah 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 blah?" Whatever. If you have any, right? If anything occurs to you, ask me that, and I will answer them. You can check back later for that. Otherwise, you can just sign in. That'll be our sign in for today. So there's that, and it'll live there in case you think of something. Um, all right, so here we go. I'm going to talk about this week and go through each thing. Okay, so like I said, we're shifting our attention to this next essay, which is going to be all about the changing narrative, right? So essay two was about the traditional narrative, and you set that all up and explained it and proved it and talked about people who talked about it, like articles. Now you're shifting and you're going to do an essay about the changing narrative. So this is the first part of it, and it also has some requirements that they want us to cover. We're going to have writing L, we're going to have discussion post, and we're going to have an assignment 3, all of these things, and I'm going to go over them. And I suggest that you do them in order, because if you do writing L and you do the discussion post in order, then basically you have most of assignment 3 done, and you can just sort of copy and paste it. Okay, so moving onwards. First, you need to locate or create and use one primary source to help you explain the changing narrative in the next essay. This is writing L. I will explain that in a minute, but you will need to either locate or create a primary source, and then you're going to use it in the essay. You also need to locate at least 2 secondary sources to help you explain the changing narrative in the next essay. And this is what the discussion post is going to be about. So you're looking at figuring out and finding 3 new sources, basically. That's the theory. So primary sources, right? Primary sources are original documents of some sort, original things like letters, right? Speeches. So the Martin Luther King speech that we did earlier in the semester, that's a primary source, right? He gave the speech. It's an original document. Interviews can be that. Actual case law, right? Using law, that's a primary source. So you're thinking to yourself, what can you use if you want to look things up, right? Are there laws that will help you? Again, the goal is to find something that's going to help you explain or talk about the changing narrative. Finding research, like finding data, like survey data, stuff that hasn't been like processed or analyzed. That's primary. So you want to find something like that. That's one of the possible options. Okay, a secondary source, right, is a source that uses and focuses on a primary source. Okay, so that's sort of, and you should be able to identify a primary source, right? So when you wrote your essay about the Martin Luther King essay, that your essay became a secondary source because it very clearly focused on this primary source, which was Martin Luther King. So that's what secondary source is. So most things, well, many things, hopefully good articles are this, meaning the article's either using data from some survey or something. Maybe it's interviewing a person, but you want to be able to pretty directly see what the primary source is, right? So if I gave you an article and was like, all right, so what's the primary source here? You'd look it over and say it's research data that the person's using from some study. Okay, like you should be able to figure out pretty quickly what the primary source is. In any event, you're going to want to have two of those. Here's how we're going to break down the assignments idea. Okay, so writing L, you're going to do one of these two things. There's a column 1 and column 2. So you're going to pick one and deal with it. So column 1 is you just finding a primary source that's going to work. So you find a speech, you find data, you find surveys, you find information, anything that you think will work. For writing L, for the actual document, right, you go ahead and create or write down the APA citation for the source that you found. You write a paragraph summary of the source. You explain how the source is going to help you show the changing narrative. And you explain how the source is connected to one of the story elements, right? Does it deal mostly with the character, a plot, a setting, or something like that, or values? So that's the first option. That's column 1. You find a source, and then you basically do this little summary and connection explaining. The second option is you can make your own source, which means you're doing a survey or an interview, right? So you're going to create a 10-question survey, send it out into the social media world to gather certain data, and this data will help you explain the changing narrative. So this involves creation of a survey of 10 questions and sending it out and then collecting the data. That, or you can do an interview, right? If you know somebody who has something to say about whatever your topic is, or some sort of expert of some sort, keep saying some sort a little bit, you can create 10 questions that the interview person will take, and you can send it to them, email it to them, and then they can answer it and send it back to you, right? So you can do a survey or an interview. You don't have to do both. You're just going to do one, and then you're going to use it in this essay, upcoming essay. What you will do is create 10 questions, gather the answers, right, and then do sort of the same thing that you would have done for this other thing, meaning you'll summarize what this survey or the interview, like what the most important information is that you've gathered from it. You'll explain how this information, whether it's interview answers or data, will help you show how the narrative is changed. And you'll also we'll talk about making a connection between your data or your interview answers and this concept of narrative, right? So are the answers, does the data help show how the plot, meaning the action, has changed in the narrative? Does the information show how the setting has changed in the narrative? Right, for my higher education example, I could send out a thing about people's experience with using online education, right? And then that will help me talk about how technology has changed from old college ways to today, where we can now have classes apparently just virtually. So, okay, so that's the first thing. Writing L is you're picking one or the other. You can find a source and then break it down, talk about how you're going to use it. You can create a source, break it down, talk about how you're going to use it. That is writing L.